why do it? Well, I already have my rail rod. What's the difference? Rods and reels are pretty darn light. They're very maneuverable. So you're not out on the rail with a 7.5 foot rail rod. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay, but you're not out on the road with that heavy of a rod and a McIver or Independent International working your butt off and doing the same thing that everybody around you is doing. Talk about the difference between the two. There isn't anything that the jigging rods can't do that the rail rods cannot. The advantage though is that mechanical jigging, and it presents itself in a very opportunistic way. There's various cadences, speeds, and things like that that you can do. So there's that. Okay, last, what does Gary say? Full contact?
Yeah.
It's really fun. There is no doubt about it. When you get a bite, especially on the pump, it's addicting. When you get bit, it is game on. Okay, and of course the battle. The rods being short, very parabolic, I mean, it's almost like you feel at one with the fish. And if you learn how to really get them to move, which we're going to show you, that's kind of the last part of it, okay? It's just an awful lot of fun. So it's different. It takes away from that mundane staying up at 3 a.m. this stuff here. And also in the daytime, it separates you from even the guys with the sinker rigs. That's where these guys have been absolutely 100% effective with it in the daytime.
So some of the jigs that that kind of match the conditions that you're fishing, if there's not much current, like little to no current, you want to try to find a jig that flutters a little bit more. So, you know, something like a flat fall, which is a widened profile, smaller fluttering jig. Those are ideal. Even the semi-long, like short, flat jigs, they provide a lot of flutter in those types of situations. And generally, when you're fishing like no current or little to no current, you could try to get away with the smallest jig possible. Like some of our favorites are daytime have been like our KB 150 gram jig. We've done really well with that, and those are usually used when there's a little bit of current. You know, you can still fish them, but I feel that it's more highly effective when there's not too much current.
Something to add to that too, if you have no current and you drop down a 500 gram jig, you may as well just right on through it, right? So the point James is making is obviously we have to adapt. Hence, it's to have multiple sizes of jigs is absolutely critical if you want to be successful doing this, right? So nighttime, I think, you know, one of the more common sizes, 300s would be the more common, 250s when current is not as bad, 200s when there's no current and possibly they're keying in on smaller profile jigs. Those would be the three, and then that's your typical KBs, best, the Punch, my favorite, and then of course the HD, which nobody wants. The HD jig, which nobody
HD
wants.
has been a really popular one this season because it's a smaller profile jig for its weight class. So
And then daytime, as he said, he makes one called the Speedy jig. That thing's the Terminator in the daytime. As far as the 150 and 250 gram, has a really good action on the fall, has a good action on the pump, on the retreat. We'll get out on the water, actually show you the technique. But basically what you're doing is you're lifting the rod tip up, turning the handle down and cranking out the slack. What that does is it allows the jig to come darting up, head drops just a little bit, and it keeps doing the same thing. Rinse, lather, repeat, of course.
The thing with fishing is like you got to figure out the cadence that the fish wants to react to. So there's going to be times where they want it fast, or they want it work very slowly, or they just want it straight grind in, you know, like really fast to the surface. So you just, with jigging, you just got to try to figure out the right cadence that they want that will trigger them to bite. Because I've been on night bites where they won't touch anything on the pump, they won't touch anything on the seam, but if you burn it really fast to the surface, they'll bite. I've also experienced too where like on the full day trips, for example, me and my brother were jigging. We're the only ones hooking up regularly because the fish want a darting movement. You want that jig to dart, right? So you get a lot of bites that way. And then, you know, like we've done full day trips where we've landed 11 bluefin on 150 gram, 200 gram jigs, just working the jigs. One of those things that kind of separates you while you're out there, you know, daytime especially. I know nighttime, you know, it's a little bit easier to get a bite because they bite on the sink regularly, but when the fish are keyed in on certain movements and stuff like that, once you figure it out, you get yourself a lot of opportunities.
So that even the special, the different types of the rigging is different. The line setups are different for daytime versus nighttime. You're still fishing heavy, but you're not necessarily going as heavy as say 200 pound. So nighttime, I think, you know, one of the more common sizes, 300s would be the more common, 250s when current is not as bad, 200s when the current is, there's no current, and possibly they're keying in on smaller profile jigs.
The setups, like we've been rigging a straight braid all the way, like say 90%, and then the rest would be like a 15 to 25 foot piece of mono. The reason being, like, floral is no stretch. You know, a lot of the people fishing floral, they're popping fish off all the time, you know. You can make a few mistakes, but normally with the longer piece, that stretch is helping. Better hook set, fighting fish, you can feel it. You know, those fish won't throw the hook as easy. Or PR knot is probably one of the best knots to use connection-wise. Like if you use anything else, like high impact, jigging is probably considered a high impact fishing. So when you set the hook, it's actually a lot of people bust off right then and there. If you tie connection or, you know, any of your knots, any of these fish, they test you to not like FG braid to FG 20 feet, 25 feet, direct tie with the chain. If you don't know how to tie the chain knot, you can just go straight SD knot. But you know, after every fish, you want to check your line. Like the slightest nick could be that one to be like, dude, that next fish might be that trophy. So you never know.
Same thing with your knots. FGs and PR knots, phenomenal if you can tie them. There are different methods. I can tell you. So those knots they're a little bit more on the intensive side to tie, but if you're going to be looking for knots for this specific purpose, that FG knot, PR knots, PR requires a special tool though, yeah. But the FG knot is a good one. Another way that you can do it to keep it simplified for yourself, certainly, is the wind-on leader method. But if you have solid braid on your reels, you tie a pivoting twist, okay, a very short one, and then all you do is it's a double cat's paw to get it connected. And it's that simple. It's 100% connection, assuming you know how to do the bimini tip twist properly. So there's that method. And of course, now we get into the J knots. Everybody asks these guys all the time on Facebook.
Because if you tie the chain knot, like if you find it on YouTube or whatever, if that main part crosses on the ring or whatever swivel, under heavy load, you'll see it. You'll come back with just your half hitches, and then the bottom will blow out. So then the ones that we tie, it's like they never cross. Yeah.
That's one of the things that the benefits of having that knot. It does provide you with that extra inch of insurance. And then, yep.
Because like a lot of people right now, like introduction to jigging, you probably would want like a 6-foot rod, parabolic of some kind, and you want to probably match it up with you know,
like a narrow reel
profile, easy to control, long handle. The handle is like crucial. So if you have like a Pan Fathom 40,
they work. Those work.
And all you need to do is buy the upgrade, you know, like get a longer handle so your rotation is a lot better when you're doing the action. Yeah, can you do it with a small handle? You could, but your action will be very short because the handle is only one thing, you know, so it'll be way smaller. But with the big handle, you get quick control and power and leverage. So when it's probably one of the, like, you could fish this all night. You know what I'm saying? Like versus a rail rod, which is
Huge.
heavy duty, thick, big. It's harder to make your moves. But you know, I think it's probably the best kind of weapon to use for the bluefin. This is one of our daytime setups we like to use, and it's 100 pound. Like that daytime fishing, you probably will want to start with 100, regardless of the fish size. Like if you run through some of these schools, you don't know if it's going to be a 30 pounder or 150 pounder. But we're going straight 100 just from the bat. Give yourself the best shot.
Keep in mind, guys, a couple of things about reels. Okay, there's a plethora of reels that are available. You have your true jigging reels, which would be single speed lever drag reels, or in the case of the Ocean Jigger, which is a star drag reel. Then you have what's available off the shelf at your tackle shops. You very well may already own something that can do this. I have the following criteria when it comes to reel selection, and it's pretty simple. I don't get into the brands because you can discover that on your own. The first thing is in regards to the capacity on the reels. One of the things that we know about this bluefin tuna is that regardless of its size, in many cases they do respond pretty darn well to drag pressure. So if you've got the will and the confidence to be able to apply that, I mean, you can ask Noe. We don't need that much line. So as far as capacity is concerned, like 450 all the way up to, say, at max 550 yards, and you're in good shape. Are there applications where you could use more? Sure. But typically what we use day in and day out, it holds that amount of line. Braided lines, you can get into the specialty, you know, PE, stuff like that, but we just use pound test because it's pretty easy for people to understand that. It's anywhere from 65, 80 to 100, depending on what size reel that you have. Capacity is concerned, 450 to 550, you're in good shape. We use solid braid on the reels just because they get a better sink rate, whereas hollow swells up, and that could be a difference maker at times. Speed, as far as the speed of the reel, we don't get into the gear ratios. The reality is what we're looking for is anywhere from 37 up to 46 inches per turn. So when you look at those specs, you start getting any higher than that, you try to jig something at 350, 400 grams, it becomes really tough to do so. Nice and narrow. Most of the reels that we're jigging with are very narrow. The reason for this is because the concentration when you are jigging is to actually impart action onto the jig as opposed to guiding the line back and forth on. Kind of finishing up on the reel portion of it, drags are also a consideration. These days on the bluefin, I don't recommend people buy reels based on what they get at strike. I concentrate more on what they can get in full. It's not that I go to full all the time, but I like to know that it's available because of the way that we fight fish on this setup, or any lever drag setup for that matter. There's a constant moving up, back and forth onto the lever as far as how I fight the fish, at least how I recommend it. Basically, I'm moving the lever forward, the more gains that I get without having the line slip off of the reel. And as the line decreases on the spool, then I'm backing off a little bit on that drag. But I care about that pull because I like, again, to know that it's available. So you kind of base it off of that, and you'll be a happy camper, because there are times where, especially I've seen on this boat, Rambo has to push guys' reels into full, and then they'll look at it and they'll back off even, because just that level of confidence. But you kind of have to do it to get these things to move. So drag is a consideration. Okay, so there's that portion of it, and then you kind of get into the final portion where everybody wants to know about the single speed lever drag reels versus the off the shelf. Pretty simple here. The single speed jigging reels, they're a one-trick pony. If that's what you have decided to do and you become very proficient at it, you will find an absolute benefit into having the specific jigging reels. For one, they don't have any hiccups to them. They have very little side load, if any. You can apply massive amount of drag on them and you don't feel that, they call it handle binding. Any hiccup on that, it promotes inefficiency as far as jigging is concerned. We ourselves are fishing a lot of the specialized single speed jigging reels, okay? So that's on the reels.
The rods, we generally fish the 3 different sizes. We have one that's for our lighter jigs, like our 150s to like 250s. We generally fish PE 3.6 or the PE 4.8. The PE 4.8 you can fish up to, I would say, like 400 grams just fine. The PE 610 is what we use when we're targeting the bigger fish at night, jigging at night, or if we're jigging
daytime.
Yeah, daytime. That's more optimally fishing like 200 to 400 gram jigs. Yeah, it's the P610. We brought one for you if anyone wants to try it out and compare the difference. You'll notice it's going to be easier to work a jig with a shorter rod compared to like a 6-foot rod, for example, right? And if you get to try it out, you'll notice that difference. Yeah, it's just a bit harder to fight a fish on a sport boat with a shorter rod because you gotta get over the bow. You gotta
under people.
Yeah, it makes it a little bit tricky, but I mean, with a little bit of experience, like you'll be more comfortable. I know in the beginning I wasn't comfortable, like, you know, hooking a fish on a shorter rod and trying to maneuver around. I lost a lot of fish that way, learning. So
Yes, can we land big ones on these things? Well, these guys have done it, and they do it quite often. So the answer to that is yes. But there is an understanding of the science and the mechanic of it. You have to understand that first before you can apply the techniques to it. And once the boat stops, we're going to kind of show you the efficient method anyway of how to battle these things on the back of the boat here, and you can see the amount of drag that you're able to put on them. If you were going to lay it on the rail, which certainly a lot of us need a break sometimes, laying it on the rail, it's not necessarily the most efficient way, because if you're waiting for the rod to come back up, unless you have swell, you'll be waiting for quite some time. The ones that did the horror, they taught me that about the lure weight on each rod and what is ideal on that. So thank you very much for that.
When it comes to like the lure weight, like I've seen a lot of you guys, like I've seen you guys fish 609s using a 200 gram jig, which is below the bottom of the jig. Now, is there a hard rule on like when you should, or is it just like I feel like it, like because during the day you use 200 smaller jigs, right? So, but you're also using a heavier stick. So, are you supposed to follow the lure weight or the line rating, or like?
Yeah, because then there's been times where like captain's like, oh guys, there's straight jumbles right now, and then I'm like, I get chewed off on 100 pound. I'm like, okay, it's time to go grab my 130 pound jigging setup, and yeah, I get hooked up right after that. So it's kind of like there's a certain way to work the jig, like a lighter jig on a heavier rod. There's a way to do it where you shorten up the pumps. Instead of having it where it's a longer, you just shorten it up, get that, and then you'll get that jig to move, dart. Yeah,
That's the hard part, to control the lighter gram jigs on a heavier setup.
Yeah.
But can it be done? It can be done.
yeah.
You just gotta play with it a little bit.
Yep.
But can people jig like up front because you're not comfortable guiding the line straight? You can start off like that just to get the momentum going. But like you probably would want to naturally hold it like something like this.
More efficient that way.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that you're using the rod and then the whole motion more of the rod flicking the jig. Normally, like with the jigging motion, you probably basic intro would probably like pull up at the same time and end up in the same spot all the time. So one, you see it'll be up and down. That's all you need to do. Like basic intro would be just like that. All the speed and all that stuff, after you get that part down, then you can ramp up your top people on the boat. Literally just the motion, and they're able to hook up during the day, just showing the motion. But when you get better and it gets easier, then you can ramp up your speed. Because there's times where when you're fishing a bluefin, you probably want to start off aggressive fast, see if they want it like that. So if they don't want it that aggressive, slow it down. You know, slow down your pumps. It doesn't need to be like very like crazy. You just take your time, relax.
Basically, you start them off with Metallica and you finish off with Kenny G. Because you're trying to really work on getting a light. So we don't really have that focus of guiding the line on. Again, 300 feet, that's 100 yards of line out. Your spool is pretty clean at that point. You have a lot of room for error. And that jigging that 75 feet world between those distances, it's really not as much of a priority. Like I said,
one important thing, like if you're yo-yo fishing and then you're checking certain depths, like it's crucial, right? You're not winding that yo-yo all the way up 100% each time you're down in the water. So the current will probably tell you how many times you can go up and down to stay vertical. So then that's like tricky because we don't know. We're not gonna know what the current is today. We'll find out soon, but sometimes it's ripping too fast. You're maybe able to check maybe 50 feet before you get too scoped out. And when you're too scoped out and the fish come underneath, your hookup ratio is probably not gonna be as good. Is there times you can get bit scoped out? Plenty. Like we've seen it happen. We've seen it happen on like dead sticking, scoped out super far. But you want to pay attention to your line all the time. Especially when you're doing like vertical jigging, you don't want to be pumping for free when you're like, I don't know, 40 yards out that way. Just stay up and down. If you get too scoped out, reset. So a lot of people, they don't want to reset. And that's crucial because the person that's working the jig all the time, look at them, probably getting hooked up way more than anyone else.
So I think we're at the spot here, guys.